Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you this morning for our March Principals Coffee Chat. This really provides us an opportunity to field some questions and provide some answers directly to parents about things that are happening at school. So I appreciate you being here this morning. Just a couple of points before we get into the review of the questions, which is usually how I set up our conversation this morning. Just wanted to say, I hope everyone enjoys a really wonderful spring break that is upon us next week and the conclusion of Q3. So if you have wonderful plans or you are just taking some downtime, I hope you enjoy a wonderful and rejuvenating break. And additionally, a little plug for this weekend, we opened our spring musical last night, which is Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. So if you're looking for something fun and entertaining to do this weekend, there will be an evening performance tonight, performances on Saturday and Sunday. So please come out to Wootton to enjoy a great musical. All right, so just a little note about Principals Coffee Chat and how this works. Some questions have been submitted in advance to me so that we can kind of field those questions and I can provide a response to you, the audience, today. We're going to go and start with those questions first. And then as we move through those questions, there is also a chat that is open. And so if you have a follow-up question or something comes to mind that wasn't submitted in advance, please put it in the chat and we are going to take those second. So please know that the chat is open and it's an opportunity for you to submit some questions or comments as well. So we have two categories of questions for this Principals Coffee Chat. 3 of those questions connect around a similar topic. So those are going to be the second ones we get to today. And I'm going to start with one question that came in first. And this one is about scheduling. So here we go. The question is, why do the schedules change for second semester? Is this going to occur every year? And I have a freshman, and it was a negative impact to receive all new teachers in a core subject, which this is a very specific structure in high school, and I'm really glad that we are talking about it. So thank you for submitting this topic, because I don't know if the information always rolls out to parents about why this happens. But for the person who submitted this question, I'll start with, this certainly is a big change for students who are in 8th grade and are now 9th grade. So that is one of those kind of big shifts that happens from middle school to high school. And that is that courses in high school across the board are semesterized, where core classes in middle school are year-long. So a student that's taking, let's say, Advanced English 8, you're in that course, same teacher, it's for the entire year. When you move to high school, everything becomes semesterized. So you're going to have an Honors English 9A and an Honors 9 English B, right? So that is one structure that changes, and that is because there are a lot of courses at the high school level, because the curriculum has been written this way, or the course prescribes that it be a semesterized course, and not all courses that are taken for the whole year. Another structure that happens at the high school is with that semesterized master schedule and courses that way, there is a switch. So at the semester, the way the master schedule is run when it is actually created, there is a split between semester 1 and semester 2. And so the way that it is even created, you can possibly get the same teacher the next semester, but you very well may not, because they're running kind of 2 semester schedules at once. For some, you will hear that that does then create a challenge, because the teacher that you've had first semester, that you have developed a relationship with, you understand kind of how they conduct their class, what the expectations are, all of those things. To switch to someone new is a disruption. It is, like, you have to kind of say what it is right up front. It disrupts something that's already in place. And then you encounter like a whole new list of teachers in semester 2. So you will hear sometimes individuals say, like, this question implies that that's very disruptive to students. The other thing I think is the principle I need to create is like the greater context. There's really 2 sides to that disruption. While for some students, the continuity is a real benefit to them in the relationship they've established. For other students, that's a restart, because things are not always in such a great shape at the end of that semester. It's a chance to encounter a new teacher, experience a different approach or a different classroom like teacher and what they're doing in their class in the second semester. It's really their restart. So you'll hear kind of 2 sides to this argument. What I will say from the master scheduling side and operational side of the school, that's, in my opinion, that semesterized shift is helpful in many cases. So it will offer more opportunities to balance classes when you do a semesterized shift and students go into a different teacher, even if it is the same course. It sometimes really offers some benefits where you see that you don't have a lot of movement in your schedule in semester one. You can do certain moves in between semester one and semester two to ease that up a bit. Sometimes, for example, we know students in semester one were taking a really rigorous class, and we have enough students in that rigorous class that we might be opening another section of, let's say, a non-honors, because that's too much of a push for that student. And so now you have the opportunity to shift a section that doesn't change another student's schedule, but yet opens up other opportunities for other students. So it can sometimes be very helpful on our end to make that semesterized shift. So what I kind of want to say to that first question is there's really two sides. I think both are very valid when it comes to keeping the continuity or possibly making the semester shift. But I did hope to edify everyone's understanding a little bit about some of the things that help us as the educators when it comes to that semesterized shift at high schools. And the vast majority, all high schools have a semesterized shift. The vast majority of them actually reduce schedules, and students have new schedules in the second semester. So there's the answer to question number one. And we'll step into those that were submitted, the second set of questions. And this topic is coming back from February as well. We're going to spend a little time in some further questions about the school's response to anti-Semitism and some specific questions about what we're doing to intervene there. So we'll start with the first question that was submitted. And that is, given the frequent acts of hate and anti-Semitism in recent months, would you consider including a field trip for all students to the Holocaust Museum? It's an incredible resource that isn't used enough and is very appropriate, I believe, for the circumstances like this. This hatred and ignorance has to stop, and the stern words and punishment, some of those punishments unclear, don't seem to fully be addressing it. So a lot of this I agree in this question. So I'll start with kind of what was at the forefront of the question, which is a trip to the Holocaust Museum. I am certainly not opposed to that. If that idea were moved forward, that would be something I would support as a principal. One thing that's written in here is an entire school trip to the principal. I will say, to the Holocaust Museum. I will say as principal, I don't know if I've ever seen a school do an entire school trip in some structure in which an entire MCPS high school experiences a trip. Usually those are more specific, let's say to a grade level program, something like that. So we would really have to take a look at structuring something like that, but I am certainly not opposed to a field trip to the Holocaust Museum. I believe it is a valuable resource. I think it's hard to argue that the impact that you want is not made from that experience and really, creates a picture for our students that we want them to have. Also in here, some things about whether kind of the punishments that we have put into place don't seem to be addressing it or the messaging. I think, it's hard to say whether the actions that we have taken are addressing the issue or not. That's very hard to measure. I will say on punishments, that we would punish a student if we knew that we had identified a student that directly was participating in a specific act of anti-Semitism. With all of our investigations to this point in time, we have not identified someone. We have not been successful at identifying a student. But if we would, then we would punish that student, and there's a specific, set of punishments we would look at. And then when it comes to kind of the stern words and the messaging, I think the messaging is important regardless of whether we shift that behavior. I think it needs to be consistent and needs to continue to come out. If we have incidences like that, you always are hopeful that it will work on shifting an individual or changing that behavior. But again, very hard thing to measure. But thank you for the recommendation, that question, to explore the Holocaust Museum. I do believe on the planning team that has been a part of like the educational approach that we have been taking, that was in their list of things to consider. So there's even a group that we can take that recommendation back to, and I intend to do that. Another question on this topic. I'm curious about the repeated incidences of a swastika etching on furniture. Isn't it possible to remember who sits in the seat where it was found? And thank you, Mr. Nelson, for the thoughtful messages, of course. I will start with just a little bit in this, which is the repeated incidences of swastika etching, right? So I just will state for the most recent one that I've communicated, it was a specific incident in which it was etched into furniture. I would not necessarily categorize the other incidences as etchings. So this one was pretty specific to this room. And is it possible to remember who sat in the seats? Yes, it is. So very common sense approach. It is absolutely one that we take. In each of our investigations, that has been something that we have done. And what you look specifically at is first as to whether you have an actual seating chart for that room. And if so, that's going to tell you right up front, students consistently are in the same place all the time. Sometimes it's a more open seating pattern, and then it's where are students sitting regularly, right? So we definitely bring those two questions forward. And most of the time, in all of our investigations we've conducted at Wootton, there was a sense about who was present around those. Those students are then in, we speak with them, and that's part of the investigation, and they're either able to help us connect the dots essentially, or most oftentimes you see students that are kind of like, I'm not sure at all what you're talking about. And you kind of have a sense right up front whether they know something or not. So we have done that. It has not also helped us identify the person who did this. And, you know, kind of nested in this question, and this is going to connect to the next question as well, but I think it's a good time to just kind of speak to the most recent incident. The most recent incident, the students that brought that concern to those that were investigating and administration felt like it had just happened. That was the impression that they gave when they gave us their initial thoughts on the incident. And we really had to give like a good hard look at the etching that we were looking at. And the circumstances by which it was discovered were extremely unique in this particular case, right? So information you get by coming to the coffee chat, and I hope this really helps you understand it better. So the swastika was not discovered visually. It's actually discovered in a very unique way. A student is shading and coloring in an art class, and when they are shading, because there is an etching underneath this paper that really cannot be seen, all of a sudden the image comes up through because the crayon can no longer touch the paper because there's space underneath. And then what is seen in the midst of that coloring is what is the impression of a swastika. So that brings the attention first. So this etching is actually very challenging to see. It's not, you cannot really see it. So the next question that comes out in that investigation is it recent or is it not? And it's very hard to tell whether that was done or not, because you actually really can't see it. You actually have to have something that shows you it's there, like this drawing, to know that it's there, right? And this particular one, it had to be sanded out. So I share all of that to let you know that the circumstances are so very specific to each of the things that we look into. But if it had been there a long time and had not visually been seen by anyone, which most likely is how it's going to be recognized, it becomes more challenging to figure out who did that because more time has elapsed in between the thing actually happening. So I just wanted to share those details about that specific incident. And let's take this last question, then we'll open it up to the chat, or if anyone wants to hop off mic and ask any further questions here. Hi, Brian, nice to see you. Since our last coffee chat, the Wootton community has received additional correspondence from you regarding the discovery of additional swastikas in school classrooms. Can you give us an update on the investigation in this matter? Last time we met, you indicated that a perpetrator had not been determined, but the investigation had revealed useful information, which you did not specify. Please update us. Certainly. So you got some information about the most recent investigation, a little bit more about the approach that we take in regards to that. From the investigations in January and February, they have not evolved since the last time we worked with them. One detail, as I might have intimated the last time we were together, the initial investigations, I feel like they gave us a sense of some students that are in multiple classes. So that has been helpful in the third investigation to see whether we have any repeats there or individuals to come back to. But again, as we learn little things in each of the investigations, we have not yet had a moment where it's very clear that we feel like we have the perpetrator, or if it is one person or more than one person, right? So we're still, and I would describe it as a very similar place in the investigations. And one thing just to connect to the most current investigation, if we felt like we had another kind of incident that took place immediately, then I think we might have gotten some additional details from this most recent investigation. But again, we can't tell one way or another whether it was immediate, like a very recent etching, or whether it had been one that was there for a long time, and it was one that we missed when we were checking furniture or looking for these things back a few weeks ago. So this one, I would say the most recent investigation, probably our most challenging one because it's hard to place it in time. So there's a little update on that. One thing that I have not yet spoken to, but was nested in some of our questions on anti-Semitism today, there was a question about if we identified a perpetrator, what would we be looking at if we were considering consequences? And this one, I just kind of want to, take you back to a resource if parents want to explore this further. When we are looking at administering discipline in MCPS, we always use the MCPS Student Code of Conduct. This is a matrix that explains if something bad happens at school, this is how you place it in its severity, and then what you can consider by way of punishments that you would put into place. For acts like this, we would absolutely start at what is called level 4, based on my analysis of the Student Code of Conduct. It can go higher than that based on the circumstances that we learn. So if you would like to explore that a little further, you can't necessarily say right up front, you would do this one thing each and every time because it's so specific to the details. However, we do have a sense generally of where we would look to start to make that determination. So I would advise everyone, if you want to learn more about that, Student Code of Conduct, it's levels of discipline, and you're looking specifically around level 4 and higher. So hopefully that's some information if you want to learn more about that. Okay, so that takes us right now through all of the questions that were submitted in advance, and thanks for everyone who submitted a question this week. This month for the coffee chat. So if there are any questions that are out there that you would like to either put in the chat or come off mute, we are now at that point of the meeting this morning.
I'm sorry hi, I'm Robin Judelson. I have a junior and a son who graduated. I'm sorry if I missed this because I was a minute or so late, but I appreciate the updates on all the incidents with anti-Semitism. And I was also at the session last evening with the superintendent. I'm curious, what is being done to educate and train all of the teachers that are probably finding themselves, some of them are Jewish, some of them are not, some of them are probably finding themselves potentially in uncomfortable situations. They're finding themselves having to address issues that they may not have been trained on. So what is being done to set them up for success, to make sure that they are able to have these conversations with students, that they're able to, hate is hate. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about GLBTQ issues or color of skin issues, it's hate. And I'm hoping that our teachers are being educated appropriately on how to address these issues in the classroom, how to speak about them to students, how to, fortunately, I don't know that we're having the same issues that some of the other schools are having, where it is as vocal between students' incidents with anti-Semitism, but I'd like to understand how the teachers are being set up for success.
Sure. I begin by saying, Robin, I think there's always more to do here, right? I think that goes without question. I think there's always more training. I think there's always additional ways to resource your teachers so that they're prepared, because it's always been my experience when you're working with students, right? Because that's really what you want. You want to resource your teachers well so that they're prepared for whatever the circumstance is, which is very individualized to the student. And so I just feel like because it's so individualized, there's always more to kind of learn or know and understand. The initial thing that we did right up front for teachers was we resourced them with what ADL was rolling out to schools when it came to just sessions right up front. And because Wooten, I really think it was timing for us, because we had an incident that I think it felt significant across the multiple groups in our school right up front in January. We had a pretty solid attendance at those sessions. There were 3 that were offered, and then there were some resources also around just the educators. The Jewish Educators Association also really started to kind of like ramp up their work and bringing individuals together. So we resourced teachers. What I cannot say that got to was everybody. So we did that initially up front. And then the next step was, how are we rolling out education initiatives, in which we got to students next, right? So I think there was some work that was done. So I can't say that we didn't do anything, but when it came to a systematic across the entire school approach in which teachers got this, right, that still has not been done here, right? So right now we're finishing up the education initiatives with students. If you want to kind of hear more about those, there was a write-up in what used to be the Bethesda Beat. They did an article that I think pretty accurately describes some of the things that we are doing. And, you know, some of our staff are now working with the other high schools that want to kind of do a similar approach with students. I'm really curious, Robin, since you were there last night, if MCPS was sharing some thoughts about what might be systematic staff approach around trainings for anti-Semitism and how to respond.
I don't think last night there was a lot of information shared. I would say that the frustration really lied in two main places. One was the clarity in terms of discipline, like if a child does X, here is what the, like, if this is what the offense is, here's what the repercussion or discipline action was. There was a lot of conversation in that space and a lot of disagreement with what was happening and how public, not public, like Johnny did this and let's say this is what Johnny's punishment is, but like, if someone does this, this is what the punishment is for that. There was not clarity that if you do something that is a hate crime in the anti-Semitic space, that this is how it's going to be handled. Overwhelmingly, people felt like teachers were not well equipped for these conversations. It's not training that's happening and I'm not speaking, this was not specific obviously to Wootton, this was like across the board from elementary school to high school. They felt that teachers were not equipped to handle the conversations. They weren't equipped to manage situations happening in the classrooms and in the hallways. That there were some, really concerned about that. And there was a lot of Jewish and non-Jewish teachers there that also felt like they weren't well equipped to manage what's happening. So
Robin, I'll say our response, and I think everyone's probably picking up, I'm a pretty transparent person. So our response has not felt proactive in this regard. So the information that has been reaching administrators, including myself, is we hear whether it is done well or whether it wasn't. And when it isn't, then we have a follow-up, right? Which is not the approach you necessarily want to take, but you also have to do that, right? I think our students need to know that if they have a conversation that just doesn't sit right for whatever reason, then I think adults are the conduit for that. Like it's how adults work together that shows like we will follow up and make sure a conversation is had as a place to start. So I would appreciate something that's more proactive and in full. I don't know what that proactive thing is, whether that's a training, whether that's guidance, whatever it is, but I agree. I think there's that need out there. I will say for training, it does seem as though MCPS is focusing on the social studies office about how to weave education about anti-Semitism, the Holocaust history, so on and so forth, into curriculum. That comes with a training when that is done, but that is, about curriculum to take back to students. That feels like that is happening. But the things that we're talking about, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, well, it wasn't clear. And I know like my daughter's in AP, whatever the AP history is that she's up to at this point. And she said Holocaust education was a bullet in a slide so far this whole year. That's it. And if they're talking about AP World and the Holocaust is a bullet in a slide, that feels like that it was a major part of world history. And that I don't know if it's the teachers are not trained or able, I cannot comment on their ability to teach. I can just comment on the kids aren't learning Holocaust history if it's a bullet on a slide. And that's really disappointing. And to be fair, by high school, I don't want to say it's too late because it's never too late, but this education has to start much sooner.
No, it's definitely not too late. And there are, we are in control of how we deliver things to students, right? So there may be a reason for that. That doesn't mean it's the only approach, right? So that's information worth taking back. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate your transparency.
Yeah, of course. I did want to share, I received one in the chat and my sense is that this is probably a question a lot of individuals are interested in. So this is from Deborah, thank you. And it says, For those of us with students who are required to take the full year health, right? Because just to clarify, particularly for our new parents, some students currently at Wooten, they're only going to be required to take the semester of health. We now have students currently at the school, they're up against the expectation of the year-long health requirement, which was a change that came down from MSDE. So do you have any insights as to why Central High School Summer School is not offering the B portion this summer? And any insights as to whether it will be offered next summer? Is there anything we can do as parents to advocate for it being offered this summer? So I'm actually going to work through this backwards. First question, is there anything I think you can do? I don't believe there is. It seems as though that determination has been made and it is in place. They have told us very clearly to the high school principals that Health B will be an option next year in centralized summer school. So that is forthcoming. It's just not there right now. And then the first question is, well, why is it not offered now in centralized time? And I will just tell you my impression. I will begin by saying, it's possible I could get this wrong, right? But if I'm reading the tea leaves right here, I think this is all kind of why it's happening this way. So I believe it's not in centralized high school summer school right now because of curriculum rollout. So we were told to do this. There wasn't a curriculum for Health B that was just waiting for this expectation when we had to make the pivot. We had to get a curriculum. It had to be tested, had to go through everything that it needs to go through. And so now it feels like it's always playing catch up. Therefore, that's why I think they know they're having it next summer, but cannot do it this summer because of curriculum rollout. What I can tell you is we will have Health B in our local summer school program that will feel very much like centralized summer school, but there's only going to be so many seats that we have to offer, right? Just to say like my opinion, I know that you'll want to get this Health B. I really think in time, even if it's not this year, students have options. They're going to be able to get that Health B if it's not really something they can take during the academic year while they're here, and summer really has to be an option. I believe in time you will get there and those opportunities will be expanding. So thank you for that. You're welcome. Thank you for that question. And just seeing if there's anything else out there, please feel free to hop off mute if you would like to ask your question directly.
This is Chris Kaufman. I've got one question. And feel free if you don't want to respond to this, if you want to take it back and come back later. But I've heard, what's the status of the updating of the weight room? I've been to other schools, other high schools, and seen their weight rooms, and to compare it to Wooten's, it's let's just say it's a couple levels below the standard, I would say.
That's being kind.
I was trying to be kind.
Yeah, that's being kind, Chris. I appreciate it. I will definitely speak to this. And there was a most recent update this week. I'll start by acknowledging it. I agree with you. I feel like I find myself saying, Chris, that this is a place that we have weights, but I can't necessarily say it's a weight room or that I can call it that. So I really do hope that there is an upgrade to that facility, as I think that our students need it. It benefits them, and many other high schools very, very much have an improved weight room in their high school. And one of the first things that I heard when someone was saying, like, this just can't happen at Wooten, before coming here as principal, I was assistant principal at BCC, and they have much newer facilities, and they had recently redone a weight room. And it was like, well, the weight room was redone in their new addition, and that's how they got the new facility, which is inaccurate. It is done in the older part of the building. Their weight room would have been about 20 years old, and they had a redo, just as like the process we're trying to do here at Wooten. So other schools have done it. Therefore, I think it should be an option for us. So things have moved forward, not as quickly as I would like, but they are moving forward. The most recent thing now that we kind of have authorization and the central office is working with us is they have sent back a couple, I believe it is 2 specific items that they need the group that we are working with in our design to look at and do some further work on that. So that is progress. It slows us down a little bit, but I also appreciate knowing that they have looked at those things, want them to be resolved. It gives me the impression that if we have these things resolved, the next thing is like we can really start to move this forward. So there was a communication about that this week. It was received, athletics moved it along. So I'm just hopeful that the group is coming up with the plans, addresses that quickly, and we can get it right back to central office. So that's where we are, a little bit of progress. And then hopefully we keep it up in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You got it. Continue to check in on that, Chris, okay? I got a question for a little follow-up with Health B, and that is, will Wooten Summer or Health B be in person or virtual? It will be a virtual option. So it will be some on-screen time. Students will not have to come to the building for Health B, which is very similar to kind of how they set it up in Central for credit courses.
Oh, hi, this is Chuck Messing. I had a question regarding like getting pre-approved absences from an administrator.
Yeah.
Is that, I know like we have grade administrators and then we have you as the overall administrator. Who do we reach out to? Is it the grade administrator or is it you if we need to have that discussion or question?
Sure. I would definitely start with the grade level administrator. But sometimes they're out, or so, sometimes they have, there are things that, for example, I think of Mr. Rona this week, who's on SAT, it might be that's the day you're looking at it, and administrators can be really tied up. So please know I'm an option as well. Really what we're looking at, regardless who receives it, is we're trying to take your request and connect it to the MCPS policy, which we of course have to follow, right? What I would just say is if it feels it's not a direct thing, then I would definitely bring it to a grade level administrator. And then we're either going to be able to align it to the policy and grant you that excused absence or not. And even if the answer is not, definitely go to the grade level administrator, because we can oftentimes still describe to you or explain how we recommend you approach this, because you're likely bringing it to us because it's something you really need to do or absence you need to take. So grade level administrator is the place to start. I can be a follow-up if needed.
Great. Thank you very much.
You got it. Yep, that's a good one. So a question to revisit, and thank you, Jessica, for this question. Revisit semester changes. All right, so here we go. Back to the discussion about semester classes. Some of the counselors mistake year-long electives as semester classes. For example, 5 or 6 students were placed in the second semester of sociology because the counselor thought it was a semester class. How can Wooten leadership minimize students being placed in a mid? Yeah, okay. So it's possible things like that happen. And this falls in the category of either electives that are not put in correct. Sometimes students have duplicate courses. Sometimes students don't have all their courses, right? So Jessica, I just want to expand this. There are certain things that happen with schedules that you want to try to avoid, right? Because then that sets up students in a way not to be set up. First, I would say if it's a specific counselor with this, I would advise that you just reach out to the resource counselor, Ms. Markowitz, because she works with that team. That's information she would definitely want to know about. More importantly, your resource counselor is most likely the person to go back and look at just how that happened, right? The other thing we're going to do is, the master scheduling process, we're going to try to run reports that show things like that. So we will have reports that show whether electives were put in semester or year long, and you're trying to see if things are in the system that we can see in advance. So I'm not sure the circumstances of this one specifically, but I just want you to know there are protocols we're trying to run to make sure that we avoid those things. Regardless, if we have a situation like that, you've got to undo it, right? You've got to make the schedule change. So then the students are put in what they need to have on their schedule. So may I ask if those 5 to 6 students then had a subsequent schedule change to rectify that issue?
No, but I will give kudos to the sociology teacher who spent a week basically trying to recover what they covered in first semester, so the students could get caught up in order to be able to continue going forward in the class. So great kudos to that teacher, but no, all the students were left in the second semester of sociology.
And they did not take first semester.
No.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting one, actually, Jessica. So we see each other, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. It might be an issue that there was a course available for students to take that is one we should not have even like listed. So yeah, I'm interested in if we have a chance to connect Jessica to hear a little bit more about that, because students would not want to show up in second semester. If it's a semesterized sociology that you could take it either A or B and you take the whole course within one semester, this is moot. But if it's one that builds on the other, those students then come in as at a deficit.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to talk about the situation and where I knew about it.
Okay, sounds good. So just checking to see if there may be some other questions that are out there.
Oh, hi, this is Chuck Messing. Just one other question I had. So I thought, like I heard yesterday, I think maybe on WTOP, there was like some recent release from MCPS of some number of arrests and knives and all sorts of things that were that have happened, have been confiscated throughout the high schools in MCPS. If there was something that happened at Woodin, would we be notified, like if there was a weapon that was confiscated at school or something of that nature?
Yeah, I can't say for sure one way or another, right? So there are certain times though that it will be looked at and determined that it is a best interest move to communicate something along those lines. But it's not a decision that a principal makes alone. So when we look at something, there are certain times you consider things that are weapons, you look at them like weapons, but yet kind of like right up front, it does not seem like this is worth communicating to the community, right? But I do think it's important that I provide some examples that I've actually experienced as an administrator. I've had a student use an X-Acto knife in art, walk into another class and pull it out for whatever reason, right? And they have their X-Acto knife in, let's say, a math class where it has no business being. So that is visual, people see it, it stirs things up for sure. But when you put the pieces together of how that happened, it really just isn't something that we would be communicating that out. We can address that in class, tighten it up, fix it, all of those things. So there are like low-level things, but it is in the category of weapon. When you are looking at something that is more significant, there very well may be a communication to that community, and a lot of things are considered. What are the circumstances? One thing that is really looked at, Chuck, so you kind of know, the system really has an interest based on who they know was exposed to that situation, right? So if you have a situation in which, let's say, a weapon thing happens and it's a dismissal, a more unstructured time out in front of the buses, right? That will very much be in consideration, that it's just a best interest move to communicate that information broadly, because you just really don't know who might have seen, feels unnerved, or has questions about it. So it just seems to make sense. Let's get the information out there so people are aware. But sometimes it's like very isolated and it's specific to a class, and you can accomplish the same goal by letting a class of individuals know. So the way it happens is when we get to communication, it involves my director, it involves the Department of Communication, and then possibly an ancillary office. So it might be the compliance office, it might be the special ed office. If a special ed student is involved, but groups are brought together, that is looked at, and then a determination is made. So a lot goes into it, but yeah, it is possible if you had a weapons situation in your school that there would be a community message.
This is Susan. I have a question. I have two kids in the band program, having a great experience. They're in the percussion class this year. And I understand my older daughter mentioned that there was potentially a cut that may be happening, that either the jazz band or percussion class may not be able to happen next year. She was not great on the detail, but anyway, mentioned that we're supposed to let the school know if we want to see our program continue. That was all the information I got. What do you recommend if we have a concern or we've heard something like that? And what does contact the school mean? Do I write you a note? How do I do that?
Sure. So I would start by reaching out if you want to advocate, of course, to me. Steph Laby is the assistant principal with that program, and then Rebecca O'Neill, who is the resource teacher. Just a little note, Susan. So the music teachers are coming to speak with me this afternoon.
Okay.
What I do want to say right up front is there is no staffing cut to the music program.
Great.
Okay. So that also, and I'll just edify a little bit here. The thing that I believe inherently when it comes to scheduling up is that you follow the students. These are their classes. It is their interest. And the course that they select, I believe very strongly, if they want to select to the degree that we can control that, we then place classes that way. That
Right.
means then it's a shifting plane sometimes for teachers. And
Yes.
courses that you have had last year that you would like to keep, or the numbers maybe suggest we need to structure that differently.
Sure.
Okay, so I would definitely reach out if you want to have the conversation, learn some more of the details. And then, please know I'm following up with the music teachers. The confidence that I have is that our music program is strong. It's a wonderful program and they're good advocates. So
Yeah.
they will have the opportunity to come speak to us about what they would like to see for next year. And that's going to happen.
Okay. So my friends, they need to recruit all their friends to come play percussion. Could you say those names again? I grabbed my pen. Stephanie.
Yep. Steph Laby, Labbe. She's assistant principal, class of 2023, grade level, but she has the arts, PE, and electives department.
Uh-huh.
And the other one is Rebecca O'Neill. She's our child development teacher, and she's the resource teacher for that department.
Got it. Yeah, mostly I was just interested in some more information because, like, as I said, I didn't get a lot of info from my junior. So thank you.
Gotcha. And thank you for that question. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, just a quick check-in, see if there might be any other questions that are out there that we can take before we begin to wrap up. All right, well, generally 45 minutes, that seems to be right about our time, so we are consistent. I would just like to express my appreciation. Thank you all for coming out, for providing those questions. I really do. I hear from individuals that catch a video or follow up with some of the responses that we get out through the principal's coffee chat. So thank you for the questions. I think it's really helpful for those that aren't even able to make it to this principal coffee chat. So hopefully we'll see you again. We have a couple more of these this year. And thank you for being here with us this morning. I think that will be a wrap. Have a great spring break if I don't see you.